The British East India Company (EIC) began trading in India in the early 17th century. Over time, it became increasingly involved in the political affairs of the country. In the 1760s, the EIC took over the administration of Bengal, one of the richest provinces in India. Life for Indians before the British was not easy. The country was divided into many small kingdoms, and there was constant warfare. The people were taxed heavily, and there were frequent famines. The British initially claimed that they were simply taking over the administration of Bengal from the Nawab, the local ruler. However, they soon began to assert their own authority. They appointed their own officials, and they lowered taxes even lower than the Nawab had. The EIC also began to collect taxes through a system called the Zamindari system. Under this system, the EIC gave large tracts of land to zamindars, who were responsible for collecting taxes from the peasants. The zamindars often exploited the peasants, and they often kept a large share of the taxes for themselves. Despite the exploitation of the zamindars, there is some evidence that life improved for some Indians under British rule. For example, the British built roads and canals, which helped to improve trade and transportation. They also established schools and hospitals, which helped to improve education and healthcare. There is evidence that the British rule was beneficial to many Indians. For example, the British East India Company's monopoly on trade benefited Indians by giving them inflated prices for what they produced, including indigo and tea, which the British brought to India. It is difficult to say definitively whether Indians preferred being administered by the British East India Company. There is evidence to support both sides of the argument. Ultimately, the impact of British rule on India was complex and multifaceted. Here are some facts, figures, and data that show that the quality of life improved for some Indians under British rule. The British built a network of roads and canals that helped to improve trade and transportation. They established schools and hospitals, which helped to improve education and healthcare. The British introduced new technologies, such as the steam engine, which led to economic growth. They also introduced new crops, such as wheat and potatoes, which helped to improve food security. However, it is important to note that these improvements did not benefit all Indians equally. The zamindars and other wealthy Indians benefited the most from British rule, while the poor and marginalized often continued to suffer. Ultimately, the impact of British rule on India was complex and multifaceted. There is no easy answer to the question of whether Indians preferred being administered by the British East India Company.